I'm really pleased to be here today to tell you all about the Cambridgeshire Culture Card project. And as a development strand of the My Cambridge Cultural Education Partnership, it felt like a very natural fit with today's conference theme around collaborative and partnership working. And so the Culture Card scheme is very much about bringing partners from a cross-sector perspective, and that includes cultural, education, research and business sectors, but also local and central government, and bringing everybody together to address the following common goals. So increase engagement by all children, but with a specific focus on closing the cultural participation gap between those children from disadvantaged backgrounds and those from more advantageous backgrounds. Communicate to children, young people and parents the positive contribution that cultural engagement makes to their learning, skills and career development. And thirdly, to create a digital platform, an evidence base that can support you as the local cultural sector to have a much deeper understanding of the impact of cultural engagement upon a range of outcomes for children and young people. So how will the scheme attempt to achieve these quite ambitious goals? So we explored a number of different technologies and approaches that could be used on a population scale across the county. And it may surprise some of you to know that over 90,000 children aged 0 to 19 in Cambridgeshire have a thing called the library card, and that over a third of those, so over 30,000 of those, use it every year. So, and nearly half, or more than half of those also live in areas of higher deprivation. And after a full feasibility study to determine that the existing library card could be used as a mechanism for measuring wider engagement, I'm really pleased to say that we are now proposing that the existing library card is repurposed as a free culture card that will be rolled out in schools and provide all children and young people with a universal cultural passport. And alongside other technologies, including mobile, the card will be something that can be used at a whole range of cultural destinations, including libraries. And this will acknowledge participation and also track young people's cultural journeys. So with this longer-term goal in mind, and with the idea of providing proof of concept, some of you here in the room will know very well that we delivered a prototype version of the scheme between August and December last year. And we delivered this scheme in Cambridge and East Cambridgeshire, and we used this as a means to create both a digital platform, but test whether that platform could support a coalition and collaborative approach to engaging more families, more children and more young people in arts, creativity and culture. And from the outset of this project, we've taken a collaborative approach to its development, from independent evaluation of the idea and concept through to independent consultation with children, young people, parents and schools and cultural providers, to the creation of the scheme's branding, identity and user experience. So, for example, our developers and designers work directly with families and children to be able to design the approach we're taking. And it is this co-designed approach that's been fundamental in allowing us to move this project, which is quite a complex project, from concept through to a working prototype product. And after discussions with young people and parents to understand what they wanted, we kind of boiled this down to a digital platform that would have 4 key components to it. The first is a web portal, which has a range of different functionality to it. So then developing the web portal that had cultural opportunities, so cultural listings, through to a mobile app which mirrored the web portal but also had the additional function of a QR code scanner, and we used that as a method to be able to record participation and acknowledge that participation. We also, at this point, used a substitute library card, and that substitute card used unique coded stickers, which could also then be used to acknowledge participation. So we used a kind of a tech version and a low-tech version to be able to engage children and young people in the prototype. And so over the period of August to December, we had a target of 160 families to join. In actual effect, we had over 250 families with 339 children and young people recruited to the scheme. And you can see here that we had 36% of those children were from free school meal or pupil premium, and we used that as a proxy for low income effectively. And those, are the schools that we engaged, and you can just see some of the breakdown of figures. So over this period of time, we approached 42 different activity providers and venues that were working in the prototype delivery areas. And a really important aspect of this prototype was being able to simulate what the experience would be for someone taking part if this was ultimately scaled up and on a population scale. So it was imperative that we made available a realistic and varied range of cultural experiences that those people could choose from, and as much as possible be representative of that holistic offer. We also knew from young people and parents that there was an increasing expectation that information on the cultural offer should be much easier to find than it currently is. So out of the activity providers that we approached, 36 agreed to take part, and the 30 that you see here actually had activities that were suitable between August and December for us to be able to promote. And essentially through the XP and Explore digital platform, that's the branding that we adopted, all of these activities could be found on the XP platform. And essentially, we created a kind of online community of arts and cultural providers, not only to improve awareness and visibility of the offer, but to make it instantly discoverable. So if you wanted to find any information on any of these activity providers, you only had to go to one place to find it. And that was really significant for the project. And in terms of the activities that we actually promoted and tried to get people engaged with, this is a kind of a basic snapshot of what was covered. So we had 374 activities and events that were suitable for the target age range, including the family offer. And that covered a whole range of different art forms, and you can see how that broke down. It also covered 16 different venue types. So this was actually working with traditional and non-traditional spaces, and we covered 65 different geographic locations also within that time. So this was openly available through the mobile app. So on the app, you could search for activities by location, by art form, whether something was free or paid for, and various other things. And so we can also, with this information, start to get a much clearer view of where activities take place, how that relates to other demographic information. So, for example, these two maps are looking at where activities take place, where activities are free or paid for, but in relation to areas where there may be more or less deprivation. And it gives us this much better, nuanced understanding of what our cultural offer is and how people can potentially access it. And in addition to trying to make information more accessible, our user feedback highlighted also another expectation around information should be much more personalised and that it should reflect individual interests or needs. So the pilot scheme not only brought the activity and event information together, it also prioritised that information according to the user's art form and location preferences. But really critically, we also asked people who were taking part, what did they aspire to take part in? So what things hadn't they tried, but they'd really like to? And that became part of the way that we presented this information to them. And we could also do more selective communication of the offer through segmented communications. Another user expectation that we found in discussion with young people was a really strong identification with the concept of gamifying their experience of the scheme and the digital platform. So we translated those ideas into things that we could make work from a practical context, such as accruing points, having digital badges that could symbolise levels of engagement, and also you can see here we developed a school leaderboard. So there was this notion also of having a common cultural currency. So for example, if you are receiving points for where you engage, that those points could then be exchanged for either a virtual or a real world reward. And that was something that really captured people in our consultation, was the notion that you have a currency that you can spend across the cultural offer. And that was something that we actively tested in the prototype as well. So in terms of the initial findings of the prototype, we actually amassed a large amount of data, so we are still in the process of evaluating this, but I thought it would be good to pull out just some key findings around the sorts of things that we can now know through the scheme. So we can understand individual engagement and participation according to whether it's free school meal or non-free school meal participation, participation frequency by those groups, and then looking at attendance trends over time. But to kind of try and sum up some of the sort of key findings would be, if I just highlight a couple of things here. In the final week of the pilot, which is the graph that's on the left, you can see that we actually had more free school meal participants than non-free school meal participants. And that's actually, I think a great achievement for us and testament to the success of the scheme. Another really interesting stat is that overall, out of the people who are from a free school meal background, we got more of those people to attend an event or an activity than we did the non-free school meal pupils. And again, I think that's a great achievement that we'll be able to take forward to the next stage of the project. So in terms of benefits for children and young people, a key strength of this scheme is that it's approaching everything from the perspective of the individual end user, and actually rather than an individual organisation. So in other words, the scheme is putting the participant first and the provider second. And it uses the platform as a means of enabling young people to have greater self-agency and to take the lead in constructing their own cultural journeys. So in addition to increasing the number of opportunities to engage, the scheme also presented this information back to the user. And we did that through the form of the creative CV that you can see there on the left. But the next phase of development will allow a young person to view this information as evidence of cultural capital in a variety of different formats. So we're looking at units that could be towards an arts award, transferable soft skills and competencies, or open digital badges that can be used to unlock real-world opportunities such as creative apprenticeships, employment or training opportunities through our partnership with the RSA and the Cities of Learning model. For activity providers, this scheme will present actually a level playing ground between providers of all different size and level of resource. And the activity provider dashboard is going to offer equal access to a range of tools to measure things like cultural consumption, diversity of access, and that shared communication mechanism where you can more effectively target specific groups or geographic areas that you're struggling to currently reach. And by linking anonymised cultural engagement data with a range of other data sets that you can see on the left there, we're going to be able to do the measurement of outcomes that previously has not been possible. And we'll be able to share those insights over time with you via the platform. And the important thing for activity providers is that you can use that information in a constructive way to inform your work, to build the case for funding applications, and also to use your resources in a potentially more targeted way. So in short, the scheme is about providing a space where you can test and experiment with different approaches, but then to see the outcomes and the results of that in real time. So in summary, the scheme is very much about providing a platform where we can effectively work together as a sector to increase engagement, communicate the value of culture, and develop our joint understanding of the impact we are having upon the lives of children and young people. If we successfully achieve next stage funding, we'll build upon the success of the first prototype and effectively scale up the scheme, working with all our partners, but in particular with libraries, so that by late 2020, we'll be able to begin trialling whole school rollout of the free culture card. And we imagine that we'll be engaging around 10,000 children and young people in that process, and that will be with selective schools in Cambridge, East Cambs and Fenland, so scaling up where we've already been working. So with that overview of the project in mind, I'm going to leave you with a question. So I think there's going to be some paper somewhere where you can add your comments and thoughts. So thinking about what I've told you, what would help you, or the sector more generally, engage more children and young people in arts, culture and creativity as either participants or audiences? And I'll leave you with that thought. So thank you very much. Thank you.